for the second straight year. The Mets offseason will be defined by their pursuit of the man known as La Potencia. And with that, we welcome you live inside Mets Hot Stove, presented by Geico. The men to my right, they also have cool nicknames. This is Figgy, Nelson Figueroa. Jimmy Dukes, the former GM of the Mets, Jim Duquette, and Newsday columnist Dave Lennon, who I learned today apparently also goes by Leno. So that will give us a nice,
new already.
There you go, a nice year, 2017. Start calling you Leno. But boys, and I'm Steve Gelbs, by the way, but let's get right into this. Gelbsy, okay. It feels like we're redoing a show from last year, Hot Stove, because it's all about Yoenis Cespedes. Jim, what is it going to take, do you think, for the Mets to re-sign this guy?
Well, the market's a little different, and I know they're going to say that it's similar, or you're going to hear those words come out, but there are a lot more teams, and there are a lot less free agents available this year than it was last year. Last year, Cespedes, no doubt, was impacted by a lot of the free agents that were on the marketplace, and he was the next guy kind of in that pecking order. Now, he's the number one guy on almost everybody's list out there, and a lot of these teams as well, outside of, let's say, an Encarnacion. So this is going to take, right now, 5 years, probably, 27, 28 million, probably, somewhere in that range. And then it's going to really depend on, will the Mets be willing to go that far to get him?
I think an important thing to note here, too, and Jim, you mentioned how he's the number one on a lot of teams' list out there. He's the number one guy on the Mets list, and that's something that we didn't see last year. I mean, last year we saw the slow play. The Mets were waiting for maybe Cespedes to come back to them, which he eventually did. They got a creative deal together. They were able to front-load that contract, give him the opt-out, and they could get aggressive at the end. This time it's a lot different. I mean, Sandy Alderson has been in touch with his reps right from the jump here. Even when he opted out, they wanted to see, gauge his interest. And now, they're touching base with him regularly, and it's a much more favorable atmosphere here to get working towards a contract that works for both sides.
Nelson, do the Mets need to do whatever it takes to get Yoenis Cespedes back in the blue and orange?
I wouldn't say whatever it takes. I mean, signing Neil Walker back, if he's 100% healthy, you're looking at a guy who can hit you 20 home runs in the middle infielder position, so that's a big guy in the middle of that lineup. I think there's some other players out there that they could go with. I love Encarnacion at first base. Again, but I think they're going to offer due to a contract this year. They're not going to non-tender him, so that's another guy that you're looking for. He has to play first base. There's nowhere else he can go. So Encarnacion may not be as good of a fit as I once thought he could be. You're looking for right-handed power. Joey Batista does not fit well with the Mets scheme when you're looking at all the outfielders that they do have and they want to play. You hear them talking about trading guys and making more room for somebody, but I don't know if that's going to be the guy that you can go after. For me, I think Cespedes is the play that they're going to want to do. They want to take that same route of going a little bit slower, but they're not going to let another team come in and swoop in and make them a big offer. We saw the Nationals last year was over $150 million, they thought, for 5 years. I don't think they want to let somebody get that big on him.
But Nelson, what you're saying, though, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that it might not necessarily have to be Cespedes, but what the Mets have in place if he leaves is not enough. They're going to need to find some way to fill that gap.
Well, you're looking at it, there's a lot of left-handed hitters in that, especially that outfield. You're going to need a right-handed guy, so that starts looking at Dexter Fowler, possibly. You got a switch hitter in the outfield. There's some other guys, lesser knowns, but that's a big guy to look at. 30 home runs and 100 RBIs. That's something that's not easy to find on any market.
Last season, Yoenis Cespedes ended up back in the Mets' lap because the market didn't develop the way he had hoped it would have. What is the market now looking like this season?
Well, you're right, Steve. When you look at the marketplace overall, yeah, I think there's at least 5 teams. I could come up with another one, and 6. But overall, and this is outside of the Mets, where in addition to the Mets, it's the Giants. When you look at Angel Pagan becoming a free agent, the Dodgers with Turner and Reddick, who they traded for at the end of the year. The Nationals could use them. They could move Trey Turner into the infield, into shortstop, because the Danny Espinosa is going to be gone. The Cardinals need offense. The Blue Jays are losing 2 of their premium guys. This doesn't even count the Astros, who are out there openly saying they're going to spend a lot of money on the free agent market. So it's a little bit different than it was. And I think the other thing, kind of touching what you were saying, Nelly, is that the market, if you were to try to find a replacement, the other ones don't fit the Mets' need. Turner doesn't fit. Justin Turner doesn't. Encarnacion really idealistically doesn't fit overall because of what they have. So it's almost like it's all in on Cespedes. And if you don't get him, okay, you got Fowler. I don't like the other options after that.
Well, one thing I like about your list there, Jim, is the fact that those are the heavy hitters right there, right? I mean, those are teams with a ton of money. And they're also the ones that the Mets should be scared of, because the threat here for the Mets is not so much where he's the best fit or what teams, want to work him into their roster. The teams that are going to threaten the Mets are the ones with big, big money, the ones that are going to blow Cespedes out of the water here. When the Mets can play in the $100 million range here, which would be a great contract for them, somebody swoops in guys for 125, 130, 140, 150. The Mets walk away from that deal, and Cespedes is going to be playing somewhere else.
Yeah, Dave, I think one thing, too, that I've sensed at least, and I don't know if you guys agree and feel the same way, but towards the end of the season, I felt like the Mets weren't exactly confident in the ability to bring Yoenis Cespedes back. They thought the market would be different this time around. But more recently, it seems like they're coming around a little bit more to the fact that maybe this market isn't going to be as robust as they thought it once were. And I know that there's at least someone in the front office, people in the front office that say, hey, those Giants looked like they were going to be a great fit, but they maybe aren't making the same hard push, potentially because of the way that they need that closer and might be spending big money on the closer situation.
Sure. I mean, I think the Giants were a team that people did mention early as a natural fit, right? With Angel Pecan gone in that situation, they needed a left fielder. It was just kind of a seamless thing. A team that needed offense. I mean, the Giants loaded up on pitching last year. It's only natural that they decided to bring in a big bat, but you're right. The market is very tough to predict right now. You hear teams in, you hear teams out. We have a long way to go. I know Sandy said he wanted some closure here, or at least some clarity by the end of the winter meetings. They'll be wrapped up by December 8th. That seems early to me, and a player of Cespedes' caliber, I think we have a ways to go before we know how much money is going to be involved here.
The other thing on that is, when you look at what the Mets have been, they're a little bit more transparent in their desire to go after Cespedes at this point in the free agent market. Last year, you remember, there was a lot of skepticism, and John Ricco, who was speaking on behalf of Sandy last year, the winter meetings, he was like, it's not likely. He put a lot of cold water on there, and they ended up with him. Now, and Sandy, that's the one thing the Mets have always done a good job of here under Sandy, is they understand the market and what the market is for a player, and they know that it's going to be a little bit more aggressive, and I think that's where some of his rhetoric here has been lately is, he's our number one choice. Not only do we need him, but he also recognizes there's going to be a little bit different competition.
I hate to cut this conversation short right now, but I have a feeling we'll have some more time in the next couple of weeks.
I would imagine so.